Hello landlords, it's Ernie. I'm back, and this week we're talking all about strategies you can use now that your case has gone to appeal. How can you resolve your case? We're talking about that today. Let's get started. For those of you who routinely watch these videos, I welcome you back. We're always glad to have people leave comments below, asking us questions, giving us recommendations for the kinds of topics they're interested in hearing about. If you give us a like, or if you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. We appreciate all of it. Thanks. So no landlord wants their tenant to file an appeal, but appeals happen. They happen about a quarter of the time. Most eviction matters are resolved in the justice court, but a few end up getting appealed. Now, of those, many of those cases never actually make it to the appeal setting. What will happen is, of those cases where a tenant has appealed, the only reason they appealed is to give themselves longer than 5 days to move out. They knew if I had a 5-day window and I didn't appeal, I could be put out with a 24-hour notice. By appealing, they buy themselves a little more time. Now, maybe they do or they don't pay the money into the court's registry. Their failure to pay the money into the court's registry usually means either A, they don't know how to follow the rules, or B, which is more likely, they had no intention of actually going to an appeal trial. Their intention was to buy themselves a couple weeks more time, and they will eventually leave. But for those of you whose tenants are ground in, they plan to stay, or they're somehow hoping to reestablish their connection to you in the landlord-tenant relationship, we're going to talk about a few strategies. So the first is to make peace. Naturally, if you have a non-rent violation and the tenant resolves that issue, let's say they have an unauthorized pet, they pay the pet deposit, their rent's on time, everything else is good. They just, for whatever reason, refused at the time to pay the pet deposit. If now they are willing to do it and you accept it, then perhaps all things can be forgiven. The other issue, the more common one, is the tenant is behind on rent. But if the tenant can resolve those issues and catch up, perhaps you've made up and you can non-suit the pending eviction and its appeal and simply go on as though there had never been an eviction filing. Another way is and this is the more common way, perhaps peace is going to look a little bit different for you, because generally speaking, when you had a default of some sort and you've had to file, you're no longer interested in keeping this particular tenant. And so if resolution involves parting ways, it's important that you make that very, very clear to your tenant. Because again, many tenants, even tenants who are multiple months behind in unpaid rent, still believe they have an opportunity to catch up and to stay, or at least that's their desire, is to stay in place. It's a little more complicated to move, and so if they could find a way to stay, that's what they're going to want. But for landlords who have seen default after default after default, you may say, nope, I'm drawing the line here. One way or the other, you are going to leave. And so you can bargain on 3 levels, and that's what we'll talk about today. The first is to bargain for money. If, say, your tenant owes 5 months of rent and they've paid 1 month into the registry, you may say, for example, look, if you pay X amount, maybe 2 months, maybe just 1 month, if you pay X amount, I will dismiss the case against you. If you hand in the keys and pay that amount, you can walk away and I won't pursue this judgment against you. So sometimes you bargain with money where the tenant pays you money because they're not interested in having an eviction on their record, and they certainly don't want you having a judgment against them, which can last no fewer than 10 years, where you can seek to, exercise this judgment against them, against active banking accounts, or to seize property. And so you might be able to negotiate with them and say, look, you pay me a certain amount of the money that you owe me, and you don't have to live with a judgment on your credit history or on your rental history. Another is to bargain for time, particularly in those cases where the infraction is a non-rent obligation. So we'll go back to the unauthorized pet. They have the unauthorized pet. You don't want that pet there, but they say, look, it's going to take us 30 days to find a spot. Our trial is 60 days in the future, and so you agree, look, if you're out within the 30 days, I'll make the lawsuit go away and protect you against a judgment, against this being on your record, and all these things that we just discussed. Now, you may, in that same thing, say, well, look, I'm going to give you 30 days, but I expect you to pay rent. I maybe even expect you to pay some damages if you know that the unauthorized pet has caused actual damage. Remember, you still have the deposit that you can use against these kinds of things. But if it makes sense for you to require some additional funds, right? You paid filing fees, maybe you even hired an attorney. And so it may be appropriate for you to say, look, if we're bargaining here, I know you want a certain amount of time, but in exchange for that amount of time, I'm going to ask for this amount of money. Now, the last one is the least favorite one, and this is called a cash for keys approach. And so, but it goes in the other way, right? And so, maybe your tenant is in such a bad spot that they can't pay you money, and you're sympathetic to that, but you're also very interested in getting your property back, and so you may want to offer them some amount of money in exchange for the keys. Make sure if you make any of these agreements, that these agreements are done in writing. You don't want to get stuck with an agreement that you cannot enforce. If it's possible to get an agreed judgment to resolve the case and just say, look, I'm going to hold this, I'm not going to enter it. If you leave, I'll dismiss the case. That's a great way to resolve cases. So I hope these strategies have been helpful for you. If you have questions about a case that's coming up in your neck of the woods, don't hesitate to give us a call or send us a text or send me an email. We look forward to producing more of these videos for you in the future. YouTube seems to think this is a good one for you to watch. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. This picture of my face will lead you right there. In any case, thank you all so much for watching week after week. We look forward to seeing you again. And until next time, happy leasing.